Old Fashioned on Purpose podcast. So today we are going to dive into organ meats. Now, we've talked about this here and there on previous episodes, but it's been a while. And since I think my initial episode on organ meats, I've been playing around with some different options and trying a few things, but I'm needing a little bit more inspiration and a few more ideas. So I am so excited to have joining me today, James Berry. He has spent over 17 years in the culinary field. He started as a private chef to celebrities, and now he is into the world of regenerative ag and has made a really revolutionary functional food product that he's going to share with us today. He's also a published cookbook author. He has lots of ideas for home cooks like you and I, and some really great thoughts on organ meats, why we need them, and how to creatively incorporate them into our diet. So welcome, James. I am so excited for this conversation.
I am as well. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to turn offal into something delicious.
Yes. Every time I even say that word, I'm like, oh, I wish we could pronounce it differently because it's not
Right?
great,
Offal.
right? With the offal sounds better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, where they think the name comes from is when you go to butcher an animal, you slice down the abdomen and it's the parts that fall off. So they think that's where the offal comes from.
I didn't know that. That's fascinating. Okay. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So before we get into all the nitty gritty, can you just give us a little bit more background on yourself? And also, I'm really curious how you became so passionate about this topic.
I know, right? I did not grow up eating organ meats. I grew up in a household that we knew dinner was ready because the smoke detector went off.
Yep.
Like that was my household. Frozen peas, some kind of starch like a baked potato, and then meat. Shake and bake was actually the thing when I was a kid.
Oh,
have
same.
You ever had that?
We did the shake and bake. Yep, and rice-a-roni and all the boxes and yep.
Yeah. So we all have to come from somewhere. But I really loved cooking from about 7 years on. And I had a neighbor that was just a home gourmet cook. And I got exposed to a lot of stuff from him. And then I took a culinary class in junior high school that really I just fell in love with. But I was a real picky eater. So it's kind of funny. I would learn these recipes and then I would come home so excited to make them, but I wouldn't eat them because I was such a picky eater. So I remember I made a tostada for my parents. And I think I only learned this about a year ago as I realized, food for me is really a love language. So it's not necessarily about me eating it. It's about when I prepare it for people, that's how I show love. So eventually though, I became a chef in my 30s. It was really 9/11 that kind of inspired me to reevaluate my life and go, I want to only do things that have heart, that have meaning. And I looked back and I was like, well, what did I love as a kid? Oh, I loved cooking. Well, maybe I should go to culinary school. And I did some research, but right from the get-go, I was a very different chef than I think a lot of other people tend to be. I was always more captivated and interested in how do I move people's health meter? Like, how do I actually move the needle, support their health, and not just focus on comfort foods. So we know that we all eat comfort foods. We know that we gravitate towards them. That's very human, but they're not really that great for us. There's not many comfort foods that are actually good for us. So how can I make them still comfort foods, but make them healthier? And when I went to culinary school, this is before it was even popular. I mean, now a lot of the stuff I learned, 18 years ago is more mainstream, but we were using cauliflower, for example, instead of potato. We were doing things with cellulac, and root vegetables in ways that no one was using them. So I found a great school for what I wanted, did that. I eventually left working for celebrities and I started a meal delivery service in Los Angeles. I ran that for 8 years, but that killed me. My health really suffered. And I think anyone that's an entrepreneur can identify that when you're running a business, it's and particularly one that's health oriented, you're focusing so much on helping others that it's you who ends up suffering. And so when I had the chance, when we moved from LA and I sold the business, I was able to be a stay-at-home dad with our second child, and which, by the way, was the hardest work I've ever done. I want to kudos to all the stay-at-home parents. The hardest work I've ever done. It was really, really challenging, but I got my health back. And as a father and as someone who was already thinking about how do I get nutrient dense foods easily into people's diets, I started to really identify what are the most nutrient dense foods. And it was organ meats,
Yeah.
hands down. Anyone could do search on it. And it's like beef liver is usually what comes up. And it's always more nutrient dense than any other food. And it's not just a little more nutrient dense. It's like 7 times more iron. It's like 3 times more potassium, whatever it's measured against. It's always considerably higher. But then it became, well, how do I get this nutrient dense food into people? Because there's 3 real main hurdles with organ meats. And I'm sure you're going to identify with these. One is that taste, the ick taste that people associate it with.
Yeah.
2, it's how do I cook it? Like it's overwhelming, like this big slab of liver, like what do I do with it? So that we've lost the culinary art around it. And then the third one is sourcing. A lot of people just don't know how to find them.
Yeah.
So I am excited to share that I solved all 3 of those with my product Pluck. And yeah, so excited to share that with everyone as we talk more.
Yeah, it's such a cool story. And honestly, it was an unexpected twist when I was reading your bio. He's like, I was a celebrity chef and now I sell organ meat product. I'm like, that is like, you just don't see that. Usually the higher echelons of the culinary world aren't like liver, y'all, and heart and tongue. So I think it's such a cool story. Plot twist.
That's fun. Yeah, that's so funny that you say it like that. Honestly, it speaks to my mission. I'm very clear that my mission nowadays is to really support people in getting whole animal. That is ultimately it. I feel like we are spending, $50 billion plus on supplements yearly. I understand why we are, because, our soils are depleted. We have modern stressors. There's lots of reasons environmentally and physically and mentally we need support. But I just feel like we're not turning towards the thing that we should be, which is the whole animal. I mean, we're already slaughtering these animals. Let's use all of it.
Yes.
So that we can benefit.
Yes. I think that's so important. Yeah. Especially for those of us interested in the regenerative ag world, which most of my listeners are. Like, we have to acknowledge that we're not just throwing things away for the sake of our cultural ick factor. Because it is about the whole animal.
Well, and we're really one of the only nations that doesn't really, have organ meats built into the traditional diet. I mean, if you look at Mexico, they have menudo, which is they use beef stomach. Scotland has haggis, which is sheep or calf heart mixed with liver and lungs and oatmeal and seasonings, and it's usually even boiled in the animal's stomach. There's blood sausage, or also known as black pudding, in Ireland, steak and kidney pie in the UK, a pate, of course, in France. And then even if you go in the southern US, you will find a dish, but it's very specific culturally. It's called chitlins. And that is the intestines from a pig. But not, you go to the West, you go to the West or East Coast, no one's eating chitlins. Like, that's a very specific part of the US.
In your research, because I love on this podcast asking the question, like, how did we get here and why did we leave some of these really important things behind? Like, have you come across any piece of our history as a culture in America, at least in the modern sense, of why did we start associating organ meats with being gross or, being beneath us? Do you have any inkling of when that really started to turn?
Yeah, I mean, throughout history, we've had an interesting relationship with organs. So it used to be something that we all ate. I mean, and I'm not talking just the liver, kidney. I'm talking really the whole animal. I mean, you talk to depending on how old you are, you talk to grandparents or great grandparents, they probably ate brain even. Like, they ate parts of the animal that we're not even touching now. So it's like when I say, oh, our ancestors ate it, I'm not talking about our Paleolithic ancestors. Yes. I'm literally talking about our grandparents, right? So this was a part of their diet. Now, I think a couple of things happened. One is that a lot of our parents and grandparents were forced to eat it. And so I think whenever you kind of go one extreme, forcing someone to do something, when they then have the power, they go the opposite direction, which is they don't push it at all. Like, they don't want it, and it almost taints the product. But I think the bigger reason is because organ meats are cheaper. So anyone out there that is fears, or not fears, but feels like eating healthy is expensive. I agree with you. It really is. When we advocate to eat 100% grass-fed beef, that can be like $25 a pound, depending
Yeah.
on what cut you're getting, right? Well, the same animal, the same 100% grass-fed animal, when you're buying their tongue or the organs, it's more like $4 to $7 a pound. So you just
Yes.
cut the price, in a third, right? So it's really it's incredible how much cheaper they are. But what happened was after World War II, so when World War II happened, you had men go away to war, the women started working. When the men came back, now you had two people in the household working, there was more money. And it was almost like a status symbol. Well, we're not going to eat
Yeah.
this poor person's food,
Yeah.
organs, this is cheap. Let's pay for the better cut of meat. And so eventually more and more people doing that, do this socioeconomic status. You then have butchers like, well, we're not going to carry it. Why would we carry it if no one's buying it? So now now it's not in your sight line. So you're not seeing it at butcher shops. And then eventually you stop even thinking about them. You stop learning how to cook them or practicing the recipes you grew up with, and then you get to this place where we are now, which is just utter unfamiliarity with it. Like
Yes.
if I told you that tongue, for example. So a lot of people have like Taco Tuesday, right, at home. A lot of people do that. So if I were to tell you that beef tongue, is not only cheaper than the meat most people are using, it's also more nutritious and it tastes better. Would you believe me?
Yeah.
Right? Like most
Yes.
people be like, tongue.
Yeah.
It's like, but it is. It really is. It's
Yes.
amazingly delicious.
Yeah, and I had Ashley Van Houten on the podcast to talk about this, I don't know, a while ago. And that was the first thing she recommended. I thought because I hadn't really tried anything prior to talking to her. And I was thinking she was going to recommend liver. She's like, no, start with tongue. And I'm like, no, really?
Yeah,
and
because
she
it's
said tongue tacos. And so we've done it. And it was so good. My 7-year-old asked me on a weekly basis, I want more tongue. And like we fried, I can't remember, we kind of boiled the tongue and then cut it and fried it into cubes and seasoned it.
Yep.
And she ate almost the whole thing by herself. Like she was obsessed with it. It was good. And it was not anything like I expected, but it was really good.
Yeah, and it's not as hard to cook as you would think. I mean, as you
Yeah.
mentioned, you boil it first, and it has a sheath around it, and it's a very thick skin,
Yeah.
and so that's the part that you're intimidated by. But once you boil it, it just kind of peels away, and then underneath it is what's really close to a muscle. It's a muscle meat that just is more nutritious because of the activity that it has to do in our mouth,
Yes.
or
Yeah.
the cow's mouth, I should say, the cow's
Yeah.
mouth.
Yeah. And to me, I thought it tasted, everyone's like, what did it taste like? I'm like, it's like beefier. It's like it's like
Yeah.
a richer beef, but not gamey and not offensive, but like it's like more beef. I don't know how to describe it. More beef tasting than a pound of
Yeah.
ground beef. So yeah.
And it absorbs flavors really well. So any sauce that you add to it, it absorbs it really well. And here's a tip for everyone that's listening is like, okay, I'm going to try some tongue. Well, if you're still feeling squeamish, what you can do, and a lot of people don't think like this, but what you can do is let's just say you also make pork, right? You make carnitas when you're doing taco night. So cook both. So you put in the slow cooker, you put the pork butt or shoulder, whatever you're cooking, in the slow cooker. You add a tongue as well, slow cook it just like you normally would. Then after that hour, however long it's been, hour and a half that it's been slow cooking, pull out the tongue, remove the sheath. And then, like you said, you could fry it up. What I like to do is I cut it up and I stick both the pork and the tongue. I stick them under the broiler. I season them with a little salt and I stick them under the broiler and they get all crispy. And then just cut them both up and mix them together and no one will know there's tongue in there.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great
So
idea.
there's ways to kind of mask and hide these foods until you start to build the palate, because a lot of people don't think about this, but in the US, so we have four main flavors that are part of or tastes that are part of our palate. So we have sweet, salty, bitter, sour. Well, there's a fifth called umami that they discovered in like the 90s. So those are our main 5 tastes. Well, we skew towards salty sweet in the US.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So when you think of it like that, and I like to think of the palette like a color wheel, right? So like if salty and sweet is, I don't know, yellow and red, then you want to incorporate more blue and green, which is the sour and bitter, and even umami would be orange, let's say. So you want to incorporate more colors into your diet so you want to look for foods that are more sour, maybe some cultured vegetables, maybe pickles, things like that. Sour products, or even bitter. So I said sour was like pickles. Bitter might be like mustard greens or arugula or things like, those kind of greens that are a little bit more bitter. And then umami is like mushrooms have an umami,
Yeah.
tomatoes are umami, and then organ meats are umami. And it's just like you start incorporating those into the child's diet that is skewed towards salty sweet, and you'll see them start to want different foods. Like you can actually support someone's diet through their palate. It's kind of amazing.
That is interesting. So is it safe to say, because I was reading something the other day and I wish I could remember, but it was saying something along the lines of like adding those bitter foods in is actually good for our health, or it does something with our digestion that we're missing a lot. Is that true? Is that like it's actually not just good for our palates, but it actually is good for mixing all those flavors together, is good for our overall nutrition?
Absolutely. I mean, like for example, anyone listening that does barbecue, we have, we're recording this before 4th of July, and with 4th of July or any kind of event where there's an emphasis on barbecue, you really do want to be eating like some kind of cultured product, like sour product with it, like cultured vegetables, because it helps to offset anything with a natural probioticness to it, is going to support the digestion of that very charred meat. Most people, they see blackened ribs and they're like, oh, those look so good, but that's actually extremely carcinogenic. So you want to offset it with foods that are going to be more probiotic or that are going to offset that. And cultured vegetables is a perfect one. You see a lot of times with barbecue, sour, like coleslaw associated with it.
Yes.
But what I think is interesting is that coleslaw, I honestly, I think that the more ancestral way of doing it was actually which was culturing your cabbage.
So
But
yeah,
I think it
sauerkraut
eventually,
basically.
yeah, sauerkraut like stuff. But then eventually I think people just got lazy or whatever, and then it became slaw. You know what I mean? It's still using cabbage, but it's just not culturing it. So the more you can skew towards the cultured or the sour, it's going to be better. But when I'm talking about the palate, I'm specifically talking about that. Like I'd like to use this as an example, like, and maybe you remember this from being a kid. At least this is how I was raised. So a lot of us, when we're kids, our main beverage is juices and sodas.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we start drinking water, it tastes so plain. It's like, oh, this is gross, right? Same thing. Like I grew up eating Skippy peanut butter, and Skippy peanut butter, once you've gone off eating peanut butter that has sugar in it and eating just natural peanut butter, you realize like that Skippy is really like candy. It's so sweet, right?
So sweet. Yes.
And so when I went to try the regular peanut butter, the non-sugar sweetened peanut butter, it tasted so plain and gross. But that's really just a transition point to your palate. It's because you've been so skewed towards sweet that when you don't have the sweet, it doesn't taste right, but that's really just recalibrating your palate. And if you just give a little bit of time, and usually it takes like 2 weeks max, just a little bit of time to just adjust your palate, you will get to the point where, like for me, I can't even eat Skippy peanut butter now. It doesn't taste right to me, right?
Yeah.
And that's the true flavor of food. Like, most foods aren't created in nature where they have such extreme sweetness. They're not like that, unless, I mean, even like strawberries that haven't been hybridized are not as sweet as the ones that have been hybridized,
Yes.
So
yes.
The more we can kind of pull back from that salty and sweet, those salty sweet flavors, and incorporate these other flavors, you'll see your palate will change. You'll become a more adventurous eater. But the key is, you just remember, you don't have to go all in or nothing. Like you can ease into it, sort of the way you would feed a pet when you're changing their food. You start out with like 90% of their old food and 10% of their new food. The same thing. Like if I was, for anyone that's a new parent, what I would do is, if I was introducing foods to my kids' diet, I would take the juice from the sauerkraut. So from the cultured vegetable, I would take the juice and I would mix a little bit of that juice into their purees, just a little bit. And that will start to incorporate sour into their mash or whatever it is. You can add some butter to, you can do these other things. But that's as much as you have to do at first. You don't have to do much.
And you said 2 weeks. It can
2 weeks,
we
you
can
can
start to
change your,
shift it. Yeah.
you can totally shift it. Now, the key though in those 2 weeks is you really got to like cut it out. We used to do this sugar control detox when I had my meal delivery service, and we would cut out. So in someone's diet, we would cut out, we would literally cut out sugar, anything that is overly sweet, starches like pastas, grains. Um, we would only use resistant starches like we would do butternut squashes and spaghetti
Yeah.
squashes, but we didn't do many yams because those were even too sweet. So we pulled out things that were either converting your blood sugar quickly or were actively sweet. And in 2 weeks, people lost weight and they couldn't do the things they were doing before. So people that were drinking like 3 glasses of wine a night, they couldn't even finish a half a glass because it was so sweet.
Oh, wow.
2 weeks. It was
Yeah.
literally in 2 weeks. It's game
That's
changing.
fascinating. Yeah. And
It's really game changing.
we're so sugared. And I mean, I have a sweet tooth, so I'm preaching to the choir here, but, we're so sugared up as Americans. Like you said, it's in the peanut butter, it's in the ketchup, it's in all the things all the time. So yeah, when I have done sugar detoxes, like you said, it's shocking what tastes sweet that didn't taste sweet before. It's always blows my mind.
Yeah, yeah, and so that just goes to show you that that ultra packaged food that we're buying, in the center of the grocery store, it's not found in nature. So the more when you're going to the grocery store, obviously we hear a lot, shop on the outside of the market. That's where the fresh food is. But I even like to take it a little further, and I say, look for things that are ingredients versus things that have ingredients.
Yes.
So look for whole foods. And yes, I know it's a pain in the butt because then you start to have to make your own food. I totally get it. But that is the only way to truly be healthy. You can't eat out all the time. You won't be healthy if you're eating out, because restaurants and these product companies, these ultra processed food product companies, they all have bottom lines and they're trying to maximize their profit. So how do you maximize your profit? Well, you choose the cheapest ingredients. So for example, salt and sugar are incredibly cheap.
Yes.
So that's why when you buy things in the grocery store, they're very high in salt, or they're very high in sugar, because they know if I add this ingredient, now the cost of this product will be cheaper for me, but I can still, charge them what I charge them.
Yes. Have you read the book? It's by Michael Moss. It's Salt, Fat, Sugar, or Sugar, Fat, Salt. Have you seen that one?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that was
great.
Just so fascinating. I mean, I knew that processed foods had lots of sugar and salt and such, but like to hear to the extent that the companies dial it in, so it's almost irresistible to us with just how our taste buds are. I mean, it's very much calculated to get you to want to eat more potato chips or needing to eat the whole bag of candy. And when I started to hear that, my contrarian self was like, oh, no, you're not going to control my taste buds. I will control my taste buds. But yeah, it's hard to resist.
It really is. And I stress to people so there's this Dr. Bill Schindler. He's a professor, and he talks about, he looks at the way humans have been ancestrally, how we ate, and just the lifestyle of humans from Paleolithic times and whatnot. And he has this great quote. He says, we humans are the only species in the world that need to look to someone else to tell us what to eat.
Yeah.
And that, like, when I read that, I was like, oh, it hit me right in the sternum. Like, I was like, that's incredible. That is incredible to think about. The only species in the world that doesn't know instinctively what to eat. That's how lost we are. And so I always kind of share that with people to just help them realize, like, don't beat yourself up if you're making poor choices around your food. Yes, you can do better, but the industry is set up against you. That we have forces outside of ourselves that are influencing us and supporting our addictive quality, human addictiveness, and supporting these kind of messed up palates.
So I'm interrupting this episode for just a second to give you a very important canning lid update because, well, people like you and me care about these things. Some of you may remember back in 2020 that I did a video that ended up going viral all about reusable canning lids. They were a great option for that season when you basically couldn't find metal lids in stores. It was a huge problem. There was a lot of drama about it. And this type of reusable lid worked pretty good. They had a slightly higher rate of failure, but they were a great option versus like just not canning at all. However, I recently heard from that company, and because of supply chain shortages, they've had to move over to disposable gaskets. And so, because of that, I've been looking for a different option. Now, last fall, when I was at a homesteading conference, I met the owners of a brand new company, and they gave me some lids to try, but I was hesitant to tell you about them until I had a chance to put the lids to use and see how they really worked. However, 8 months in, I've been using these lids exclusively, and I am so impressed. The name of the company is 4Jars, and basically they just kind of check all the boxes for me. These lids seal beautifully. They are heavy duty. You can purchase them in bulk for a discount. They have free shipping options, and they're a small family owned company that really cares about their product and their customers. So I am so happy to be using these lids now. And if you'd like to give them a try, you can head on over to theprairiehomestead.com/4jars. Use code PURPOSE10 to get a discount. And I'll drop all that info down in the show notes. So now back to our episode. That is such a striking fact and so true. We don't know what to eat anymore. We're waiting for the experts to tell us, which most of the time I feel like they're still shooting in the dark, but they have usually a motive to why they're telling us to eat what they're telling us to eat. Do you find when people start to get off the processed food, eat more ancestrally, cleanse the palate, that they can start hearing their body's nudges and they can start to understand intuitively what to eat more?
Absolutely, 100%. So I had this experience that I think is really a testimony of exactly this point. So when I lived in LA, I got hired to support this restaurant, these people that were wanting to start a restaurant. And so I was going to develop the menu for the restaurant. And the way we started that process is we went to all their favorite restaurants in LA, and they were showing me, okay, because they wanted to have, for example, like a roasted potato in their restaurant. But they took me to the place that had their favorite potatoes and said, okay, this is your benchmark. You either have to get the potatoes to taste this good or better. And so we walk into this restaurant, and the minute we walk in, I'm hit with this smell of rancid oil that I know to look for. Like I'm very aware of that smell because I don't eat those kind of oils. I don't do lots of fried food, right? And they didn't smell it at all. And so then I knew immediately when I was going to get this dish, I knew exactly what it was going to taste like because of that smell. And I also knew that it wasn't going to be good. I just knew it. Yeah. And that was my instinct as a chef. And it came to the table. I tried it, and exactly, I could taste like the poor oils that they were using. It had that rancid, burnt taste. And I was like, oh, this is gross. And they're like, are you serious? Why do you think this is gross? I'm like, you guys, please, like, give me 2 weeks. Let me just cook for you for 2 weeks. And then come back to this restaurant and you tell me if you think it's good. So then for the next 2 weeks, I pulled out any vegetable oils. I really just focused on real foods. We didn't do any processed foods. And they went back to the restaurant after now having shifted their palate. And they were like, oh my gosh, you're right. It's disgusting. But we didn't know. Yeah. And I'm like, I know. Yeah. Because our palates, like most of us are living below normal. Like if normal is thriving, which we really should, our human body is miraculous. Like it is the most like amazing thing in the entire universe is our human body. I think that and the universe, I think, are both just truly, truly amazing. And most of us are walking around below, like not feeling good and just not aware of it though, because we've been living in chronic disease for so long that we think it's normal. You know?
Yes.
And it's the same thing with our palates. It's the same thing with, if you're finding that you are always addicted to certain foods, it's usually due to an imbalance. But if you don't know that, then yeah, you're going to kind of keep doing the status quo.
Yeah. It's so fascinating. I just love when that intuition kicks back in, just what we've been given and we can finally listen to it again. It's a good feeling.
Yeah. And you need to provide, like, we need to be kind to ourselves too. There has to be grace in all this, because when you're trying to change something like that, like change that, like listen more to your body. Well, you have to create some space from the addiction, that most of us are feeling. So that means that, for example, like if you find next time that you're craving some kind of ice cream or candy or any dessert, right? Take a breath and maybe go for a walk.
Mm.
or drink some water. Just give yourself a moment away from that urge, right? Just pull out of that urge. Drink some water first. A lot of times we confuse dehydration with hunger. So
Yes.
drink some water and then just literally go for a walk around the block. Just get out of that headspace, get out of that environment. And then when you come back, see if you still crave that item. But that's one step towards really starting to follow, release yourself from that addictive pull of those urges that we're taught to, we're taught from a very, I know I'm kind of going off of this, but I'm so passionate about this stuff because as a father, I mean, it's something I think about a lot, but we are so taught, like, look at how our society is framed. When you have a good day, let's celebrate with food and
Yeah.
desserts and sugar, right? If you have a bad day, oh, I'm sorry you had a bad day. Go eat that ice cream tub.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like
Yep.
we literally reward ourselves for good or bad days with food. And right there, that is how you build in those kind of addictive, sugar addictions and or just addictions to substances. That is how you build it.
Yep.
Is you start equating it to other things that are outside of what you actually are craving, like what you actually want, what your body needs. It becomes like well, I should do this instead of I want to do this.
Yes, totally. And we conditioned ourselves that that's normal.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like I had a hard day. I deserve this whatever, this piece of cake or whatever it is.
Yep.
Like,
Yep.
or I worked really hard. I just graduated. I deserve this cake. It's like it's funny. I mean, but it starts from when we're little kids. Like, oh, let's celebrate your birthday. Let's go get a huge cake and let's completely overdose with junk food and and sugary items. When ultimately, what do you really want? Like, what is the thing that we all truly, truly want as humans? If you break it down, is we just want to connect. We
Yes. Yeah.
literally just want to connect with people. We want to be heard. We want to be in relationship. We just want to be in someone's life. Like as a father, and I'm not saying I'm perfect at all, but I definitely recognize more and more that my kids just want time with me. That's the gift.
Yep. Yep. Amen. Yeah. So on the topic of kids and food, I think that's such a good topic. Just so I want to hit on it for just a minute, just because especially our American kid food culture is so, I don't even know what the word is, bland. And we have this idea, if you go to a restaurant, there's the kid menu with corn dogs and the chicken strips. And it's like we have this belief that kids can't eat anything with flavor or nutrition. So maybe both from your experience as a father and a chef, I think I know the answer to this, but I want to hear what your answer is. Can kids eat more flavorful food? And if they're already accustomed to dino nuggets and corn dogs 24/7, how can a parent help them transition into better options?
It's a great question. Yeah, and it does. So I feel like I have to almost answer it in two ways. So one thing is if you're a new parent, and even, I think this actually could be the answer for both. Even the parent that's kind of locked into dino nuggets, that ultimately they're going to respond the most by what we model.
Yeah.
As adults, right? So I would start right away, and this is for the person who's just had kids or the person that is already in it with their kids and their kids are picky eaters. I would start with only cooking one meal for the entire family.
Yes.
And there will be a transition that, when your kid is like, well, you guys were having roast chicken, where are my chicken nuggets? It's like, well, we're not doing that anymore. We're just going to cook one meal. And if you don't want to eat it, that's okay. But you can eat whatever's on the table that we've served. Eat as much or as little of it as you want, but this is dinner. There is no other meal. And it's going to hurt at first. You're going to see your kids fight you, and they're going to, particularly if they know that if they're really loud and kind of violent, that they get what they want. If they've already been trained that way, it's going to be hard transition, but they will transition. I promise you, a kid will not go to bed starving for more than a couple days. Like they won't.
Yep.
They just won't. And so you do have to kind of, depending on how far in you've gotten with that bad habit. I mean, I'm saying bad, but that's a judgment. But whatever that habit is that you're trying to change, if depending on how far in you've gotten with that, it's going to have to be, it's going to be harder. If you haven't
Yeah.
gotten too far in, then you'll be good. But I think it's really important as parents, and I used to deal with this a lot with clients, was they'd be like, why is my kid addicted to Cheerios? And I'm like, well, Cheerios do not grow on trees. Like, the kids are not finding Cheerios out and about
Yeah.
when you're, in the stroller. They're not picking them from the bush as you stroll by. You're bringing them into the household. And so that's the first step. And as fathers, any fathers out there listening to this, like, we're the biggest culprits of this. We are the biggest culprits because we connect with our kids over treats and food and like food experiences. So whereas a mother might just hug their kid, right? They
Yeah.
connect physically. We tend to be like, well, let's go get ice cream. It's Papa
Yeah.
daughter day. Like, let's go have a treat. And so we are the biggest culprits of just bringing the food, these undesirable foods, into our households, and or bringing those experiences into their lives, when if we just didn't do it, they wouldn't know, they wouldn't be exposed to it.
Yeah.
And so it does require, I mean, what we're talking about is not easy. We're talking about changing our mindset, that we're no longer going to view treats and these kind of like sugary junk food experiences as necessary to connect with our kids. And then it requires us not bringing in these things. Don't bring anything into your kitchen that you don't want your kids to eat.
Yeah. Because
Like,
they will
you're in
find it.
charge.
They will weasel that thing out and find it. Get it.
Yeah. And
back.
if, and that's the other hard truth, is that, okay, once your kids are old enough, they're going to eat what they want to eat, right?
Yes.
But that's even more important, why you have to be able to create that space. Like, the kid needs to know, what does it feel like when I don't eat this junk versus when I do? And the only way they're going to have that distinction is if your household is the sanctuary. Your household has to be the place where they don't get that junk. And then that way, when they get it back, outside in the world, and you have no control over it, they go, oh man, I just ate this thing and my body feels so icky. Right? That's the only way you're going to teach your kid how to, like, to listen to their body, is they have to have a contrast.
Yes. I love that. And then, I had a recent guest on. He was talking about how he lets those natural consequences take effect with his children. And it was really inspiring. And just like, yeah, I mean, if you want to eat the giant bowl of ice cream, that's fine. But then you also get to feel what that does to your body. And then you can that'll help you make better choices, versus me just, nagging all the time. Although I think the education on the parent side of things and having those conversations is still really crucial, because sometimes kids are too small to be able to sort through that.
Yeah, which even supports more so, like, sometimes it's not even our words, it's just our actions, right? If your kids don't see you eating dessert after every meal, then they're not going to be conditioned to think that that's something they should do.
Yes.
Now, the other piece too is, and this is going a little deeper, into the weeds with it, but is, think about, how do we best learn? We're all basically three types of learner: your visual, your kinesthetic, touch, or your auditory. Those are really the three main types we learn. So if you find your child responds more to visual, then right there, that tells you, if it's not in the house, they're not going to think about it. They're not going to crave it. If they're more verbal, then explaining things to them is going to be more supportive of how they learn.
Yes. And the on the touch piece, because I have, homestead audience, having kids involved in the inner workings of food production, whether it's the garden or the barn or the chicken coop, has been so crucial. Just like, there's stuff my kids will eat from the garden that if I were to have presented it, from the store or on a plate, it would have been like, eh. But because they watched it grow and they helped it grow, like, they like eating raw onions. If it comes from the garden, they just eat a raw onion for no good reason. And I'm like, okay, but if I had done that from the grocery store, I don't think they would have had the same effect. So there's some sort of weird novelty when they get to watch it grow, which is kind of magic, because I'm watching it in my kids. I'm like, you guys have pretty insane palates for your age. And I think it's the homestead who's cultivated that.
Yeah, I love that. I think I absolutely incorporate that in my household as well. I even take it to the point of, like, when we're meal planning for the week, like, I let my kids support that process. Like, so they're very much in control of, like, so what are we going to eat today? And that might involve walking to the garden first. Well, what do we have?
Yes.
Like, let's see first what we have. And then we will go through cookbooks and magazines, and my kids will just pick visually what looks good. And then that will be the meal plan, that week. And then the other piece is incorporating them in the grocery shopping, you know, obviously setting some rules, like letting them know, like, hey, if, you know, A, don't go to the grocery store when you're hungry.
Yes.
And then B, let them know right from the get-go, we're only going to buy what's on our grocery list. And that's the power of meal planning, because when you meal plan, you create a grocery list, and we're only going to buy what's on that grocery list. So that means there's no impulsive purchases. You know, there's, oh, well, look at that, you know, cake, or look at that candy bar. Can we get that? It's like, no, I'm sorry, it's not on our grocery list. You know, so just set the rules, the boundaries, you know, if you will.
Yeah. And such good life skill, just in all the ways. Yeah. So good. So good. Okay. So I want to go back to organ meats a little bit, because you have so many good thoughts on cooking and palate expansion, and I want to weave the organs back into this. So I guess my first question is, I'd love to know, what's your favorite organ meat and how do you cook it? What's your absolute favorite dish?
You know, honestly, I created Pluck because that is my favorite way of getting organ meats. So I'll share first what Pluck is, and then I'll go into, okay, once I've done that, then I go here. So, so Pluck is a freeze-dried powdered organ meat seasoning. So I take the freeze-dried powdered organ meats, and I would take 5 of them: liver, heart, kidney, spleen, and pancreas. And I combine them with spices and herbs. So now you're basically getting that organ meat nutrition every time you season your food. So it's super easy. It makes food taste better. You'll be able to speak to that since I know you've tried it. And it's like, there's no barriers. You don't even need to know how to cook. You could be eating out that day and like just sprinkle it on, bring it with you, right? So I love that personally. We use it all the time. My kids use it in everything. I use it on everything, and it's because it's easy. Like, and I honestly, like, even as a chef, like, I still want what's easy. I mean, I don't want to spend hours and hours in the kitchen anymore. I've been in the field for so long. Like, I've been a chef for so long. And it's like, I'm kind of over that. Like, I'd rather just do what's easy, what's delicious. Just let's do that. But I also, of course, want it to be healthy. So once I've kind of eaten, you know, gotten my fill with Pluck, or if I'm just kind of like, now I want to actually dive into organ, the first one I choose is a variation of what we already, I guess we talked about tongue, but what I focus on is chicken hearts. That would be the first organ I recommend people try. And that's because they're very mild. The heart of any animal is more muscle meat than organ. Like, you know, we call it an organ, but it's more like a muscle meat. But specifically with poultry, it's incredibly just like, it doesn't have a strong taste at all, like not at all. And so what I do is, when you go to buy chicken hearts, you'll usually buy them in a small container, and there'll be like 10, 15 hearts in that container, because they're small. They're like the sizes of a small mushroom. Yeah. And so I treat them like mushrooms. If I'm making a spaghetti sauce or any kind of sauce, what I'll do is I will only add a couple of those chicken hearts. I'll chop them up so they don't look like a heart. And then I'll throw them in the sauce, and no one knows they're in there. Not a single person. So you just make sure you're not doing all 15 hearts. You're maybe doing 4 max.
Okay. That's brilliant. You know? Yeah. I haven't thought of that one.
But chicken hearts would be the next, like, the easy entry point to eating more organs. And then I would say the next step is to go buy a beef liver. Now, the reason why I'm emphasizing the beef liver is because it's incredibly nutritious, right? But here's the thing: when you get it, it's probably going to be frozen, and it's very large. So it's going to seem overwhelming. So what I advise is you don't defrost it, because the only part that's overwhelming is when you defrost it. So keep it frozen. Excuse me.
Bless you.
Thank you. So keep it frozen. And what you do is, when you're doing like ground meats, pull it out and just grate some into your ground meat. And then put it right back in the freezer. So you're never defrosting it, so it's never overwhelming. But then you're grating a little bit of that liver. You know, let's just say you have a pound of ground meat. You're probably adding maybe 2 tablespoons. You're not adding that much. Okay. And then basically add it to the meat. Once again, no one will know. This could be for hamburgers. This could be a sauce, whatever you want, a bolognese. But just do about 2 tablespoons of grated liver, put it back in your freezer. Now it's not overwhelming. Like, you just pull it out every time you want to use it.
Yeah. And that, because the liver can be pretty strong. So that you find that's a good ratio in terms of getting those hesitant organ meat eaters to be okay with that.
Yeah, so as long as you keep that ratio to about 25% max. So
Okay.
there's a lot of blends you can buy that already have the organs in it. Like Force of Nature has one that has, I think,
Yeah.
heart and liver in it.
And we
But
sell
that,
one
and
too
they
with
put,
our grass finished beef. Yeah.
oh, you do? Okay.
Hmm.
And what percentage are you guys
I
putting
think
in?
we're about 20% liver and 80%
Yeah.
ground. Yeah. Beef.
Yeah, that's the way to do it. So anything under 25%, you're not going to notice the taste, and you won't notice the change in texture as well. But I find when you go over that, then yeah, it kind of starts to come in. Now, some people can really be really sensitive to the taste of organ meats. Like I know some people that have tasted Force of Nature even, and Force of Nature is only 10%, but they've tasted that one. They're like, yeah, I can taste the iron.
Mm.
Now, I would offer that they may be projecting that, like they may, because they know it's in there, they're
Yeah.
looking for it, so that could be psychosomatic. But the other thing is and this is why I love eating my nutrition versus swallowing a
Yes.
capsule.
Yes.
This is why I love eating my nutrition, is because your body, maybe this person who I was talking to, maybe they already have enough iron. Like maybe
Hmm.
they don't need more, and their body is saying, you know what, I'm good. I don't need more organs right now. So when you eat your food, you get an immediate like an immediate communication of whether your body needs more or less of whatever you're eating. Like think of salt. If I put salt in your tongue,
Yeah.
immediate, like there's no delay. But if you swallow a salt tablet, then maybe 20 minutes later you feel bloated and you're like, why am I bloated? Oh, I got too much salt. So one is
Yeah.
the delayed kind of guesswork communication, and one is working with your body.
Oh, that's so good. I think I was just it might have been from Redmond salt. I know you use Redmond in Pluck, which I made me love it anymore even more because I love Redmond Salt Company. But they had like this electrolyte mix called Relight that has some
Yeah.
salt and stuff. And I think I was reading on their social media that like if you drink it and it tastes extra salty, then you might not be needing that right now. But if you drink
Yep.
it and it doesn't taste salty, then you probably need to be drinking it. So I thought it's that same kind of thing. We're just getting that instant feedback, which is so important.
Yeah, and it's something, once again, people don't talk about as much, that the importance of eating our nutrition. We're so locked into saving time and like guessing, kind of self diagnosing, and that we just start taking all these capsules. Well, here's kind of a scary thought, and I don't have proof of this, but I have heard through different circles that it's true. Like we're eating so many capsules, and because it's not always clear that the companies are using 100% gelatin in those capsules, sometimes you get microplastics in those capsules,
Yeah.
particularly when you're buying very cheap supplements, right?
Yep.
And so what they're finding is like people in these cadavers of people that have passed, they're finding all these undigested capsules
Oof.
in there because
Oof.
the microplastics don't break down.
Yeah.
So that's something to think about too, is like a lot of these businesses are not regulated. You don't know what's in the food. I mean, there's always those watchdog companies that are sometimes will do stuff like, let's check all the avocado oils in the stores, and then they'll find like
Yeah.
only two of them actually have avocado oil, the
Yep.
rest are cut with other stuff. That stuff is happening all the time. We don't The FDA, the USDA, they are not capable of truly like monitoring everyone all the time and aggressively. They just don't have the system to do that.
Yeah.
And so you are stuck trusting that companies are choosing the right ingredients, are doing the right things, and sadly they're not all in integrity. And
Yeah.
that's why, once again, you're going to always hear me say this: you got to make your own food, because you're the one that gets to choose the ingredients when you're making your own food. You're not relying on another, a company to do it for you.
Yes. And I mean, yeah, going through the process of trying to vet all those companies it feels to me that feels more exhausting because some of the detail you have to go into, and you don't always, like you said, you don't always get that information straight up. They're not regulated. They can do some sneaky things with labeling. That feels more time consuming than just, yeah, making it yourself or even growing it yourself if you can, and if you're in the right spot. So yeah, you're spending the
Absolutely.
time one way or the other.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of speaks to another thing too. Like I call it, you don't fall asleep at the cart when you're grocery shopping. Um, but basically you always want to make sure that if you are buying a processed food, that companies get bought and sold all the time. And so let's just say that company may have started out being very high integrity, high quality
Yeah.
ingredients, but then they got bought by a bigger company, and that bigger company eventually changes those ingredients. So if you're buying something that you've been buying for many years, you should still be reading the ingredient list just to make sure it is what you thought it was, what
Yes.
motivated you to buy it previously. Because they
Yes.
change. They
It
really
does.
do change.
Yeah, everybody gets bought, and yeah, I hear that every once in a while. The big company buys the little organic company, and all the good stuff kind of morphs in a not great way. So I want to play devil's advocate for a minute, because you mentioned, adding a little bit of chicken heart, adding a little bit of liver, and then I'm thinking about Pluck, because Pluck is just a sprinkling generally. So what if someone's listening and they're going, okay, cool, but like, does that really matter for the nutritional aspect? Am I going to get enough with just a few chicken hearts or a sprinkle of Pluck? Like, does it really like count for anything?
I love this question. You probably are already noticing I tend to think a little differently. I ask questions in a way that a lot of people aren't typically asking them, and I think I attribute it to just who I am, but also just how long I've been in this field. I've just learned that trends come and go. Diets come and go, and that's why I'm always I'm less emphasizing a specific diet and more emphasizing real food, because that to me is the mainstay. But I love this question because I think it says a lot that we're focusing on how much of something.
Yeah.
So if you look at any part of our existence as humans and think about anything you're working on, whether let's say you're someone who's working on intimacy, let's say you're someone who's working on a new language, what is it that moves the needle of you as a human? Is it like, if I'm working on intimacy, would be hugging you for 24 hours, one day a month, would that make me more intimate as a person? Or would
No.
me giving one hug every day for an entire year support me being more intimate?
Yeah, absolutely.
You get what I'm saying? Like, we focus on how much of something, but really what we should be asking ourselves is how often. They more and more have proven that the thing that moves the needle is not like the intensity of the exercise all in one day. It's actually, if you just even go on walks daily after you eat meals, you will move your health needle more than the person that goes to the gym twice a week.
Yes. Yep.
And so it's really about that. But the other point I like to make is like, okay, and you can go on our website and we have a graph of this on our homepage, the eatpluck.com, that basically we're showing, okay, this is the most popular seasonings. It's like Lowry's and Old Bay and Goya. Those three are the most popular seasonings in the US. And it shows you what they have in them, like in terms of the nutrition that's in them. And you'll see it says none, 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 none. And then there's tons of salt. And then they also have some sweetener, some sugar, right?
Sure.
And then you look at ours and you'll see every vitamin mineral that we were comparing to these other seasonings is ticked off. There's something in ours, except there's no sugar. That's the only one that says none, whereas theirs has that. And so right there, I always like tell people, like, we're not requiring you to do a new habit. Like, we already season our food. All I'm saying is use this, and now you are getting micro dosing frequently because you're using it on every meal, which is cumulative effect.
Yes.
And you're getting things that you were not getting when you were using Lowry's or whatever the seasoning is that you're lemon pepper, whatever it is. You're getting these nutrients, these micronutrients that you were not getting in there. So even if you're moving the needle a little bit each day, wouldn't you rather do that than use things that are harming yourself a little bit each day?
That's such a good point. And I think we humans we just love the all or nothing. Like, I even say that in the homestead world. People are like, oh, if I can't move to 100 acres with a milk cow, I guess I can't homestead. And I'm like, no. You can like bake some bread, or you can plant a basil plant. Like, it's really about those little tiny actions that add up in a really big way.
Totally. I mean, like, look at how, look at how we are with food, right? If someone's, let's say, on a very restrictive diet and then they have a bad day where they eat, something off that diet, what is the statement they make? Well, since I did this, I might as well just spend the whole day eating whatever I want, right?
Fell off the wagon,
it's all
over.
Yeah, right? It's this kind of woe is me, and like, I guess I just have to throw everything out the table today. And then you wake up the next day and now you're feeling, now your addictive cravings are back, and now you keep going. And then that's how you fall off the wagon in terms of whether it's drugs or food or whatever. The other thing I want to kind of point out around microdosing is I like to look at it from the negative perspective. So glyphosate, which you're probably very familiar with as
Yes.
a homesteader, it was created by Monsanto back in the 50s, and it was put in Roundup, which was a weed killer. Well, that had glyphosate in it, and it was sold to America as it's extremely micro amounts. It's not going to affect human health. Don't worry about it.
Yep.
And then what happened is everyone sprayed everything with it, and eventually they even created seeds that wouldn't grow unless it was sprayed on it. And so now you had this micro amount that was used often enough where now currently in modern times we cannot get rid of it. It's in our water, it's in our food, it's in our air, it's in our soils. They're finding it in breast milk. They found it in hummus. Like, we cannot get rid of it. And in all intents and purposes, it's killing us.
Yes.
A lot of chronic disease is coming from glyphosate, from the glyphosate in our bodies. So that is an example of like microdosing can work. It can work for the negative.
Yeah.
And I just want it to work for the positive.
Yeah.
Because I know that if it's easy and delicious and it doesn't require a new habit, then you're going to do it. Right. And it's like the thing that moves the needle is the thing you're doing the most often.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, what is it called? Like habit stacking, where if you're already doing something, just like hook the new habit into it. And that makes it easier. And that's really what you're doing. You're just replacing whatever you're getting at the grocery store with MSG, that seasoning mix. You're getting rid of that and putting something that's actually nutritious. So it's not like it's a whole new thing you have to adopt. You don't have to go, do something crazy, buy a new machine. You're just incorporating into what you're already doing.
Exactly. And as a parent, I know you can identify with this. It's like, we don't need anything that makes our lives harder. We really don't.
Yeah. We got enough. We're good.
Yeah, we're good. So just give me something that I know my kids are going to like. And kids love, I mean, it's off the charts. They love it. And we were talking about this earlier when we first started, that I think they love it, not just because it tastes good, but it's because they are in touch with their bodies. Their bodies know exactly what it needs.
Yes.
And they haven't been influenced and tainted the way we have as adults. And so I've found when kids get a hold of Pluck that they can't stop eating it. Because their body's like, give me more, give me more, give me more.
I can attest to that. You sent us I think you sent us one of each flavor, and my kids were like, what is this? And I'm like, well, it has, because they're not afraid of organ meats. So I'm like, it has some organ meats in it. It's a powder. And they're like, oh, okay. I'm like, do you want to try it? And so we opened the bags and they started tasting. I think my son put some on popcorn, and they were like, oh, this is so good. We want to try the next one. We open all of them. We would try every single one of them. So they, immediately, like, there was no transition period for my kids. It was like all in. So
that's awesome. And I love it on popcorn. To me, it gives so much flavor to certain foods like popcorn that I can't eat popcorn without it now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because popcorn tastes so plain without it.
Yes. Yeah, it's so good. Okay, so that brings us to a great natural close. Can you give everybody the scoop on where to find it? I know your website's eatpluck.com, and just give us the whole spiel on where to grab it from you.
Absolutely. So yeah, you can go to our site at eatpluck.com. You can also go to Amazon. We are sold on Amazon.
Oh, sweet.
And if you're just curious if it's sold in an area near you, we are in some retail, not a lot. We're kind of more focusing on e-commerce, but we have on our website a location area, and you can see if we are in a retail or clinic near you. But for the most part, you'll find us on our website, and we have lots of recipes too.
Oh, awesome.
Even you mentioned Ashley Van Houten. Like, we have on our site a beef heart jerky recipe from her cookbook.
I love that recipe. Yeah,
it's an awesome recipe.
So good. We've made that several times, and it's so good.
Yeah. So what we did is every recipe on our site utilizes Pluck as well, but that is one of the recipes, and we have tons of where like recipes where you can use organ meats in addition to the recipe. Like, we show you that, but it's also, we just show you really great ways to get Pluck into your meals. And what's kind of fun, and I don't know if you've experienced this yet, but I assume it's because the way your kids reacted to it already, you're going to, is we get told a lot that they're like, oh, I didn't do anything different. It's a meal that they make every other week in their household, one of their staples. And they're like, I didn't do anything different but use Pluck. And my family that night freaked out. They were like, oh my gosh, it's so good. And they wanted seconds, and they had never previously wanted seconds of the meal.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, that's a win. That's cool.
For sure. Yes. Spicing up the stuff you're already making is a big win. Because sometimes, I get into the meal planning ruts too. So if you can add a little extra oomph to that, it's always a good thing.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And we'll make sure that your audience has a discount as well. So
Okay.
look in the show notes and we'll give you a discount.
Yes. Awesome. We'll stick all that info, guys, a link and the discount code down there. So check it out. And just you guys will really like this. I think many of you I know are kind of like I was. You're wanting the organ meats. You understand the benefits. You're just not quite sure how to incorporate. And this is a really great transition period or transition product. And honestly, beyond transition, it's just good all the way around, just for flavor and nutrition. So absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah, I call it like the gateway to getting organ meats in your diet. It's just so easy. So
yeah, it takes a lot of that trepidation out, which is really important. So
yes.
Yeah. Well, James, thank you so much. This was fantastic. I appreciate your time and your knowledge, and it's just a really good conversation. So thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.